Well, The Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature early access reviews are out, and I watched over 8 hours of content. Here's what you need to know about the bugs in this pack, settings, and some key features. I will be providing a full list both of the content creators I watched and additional ones in case you are interested. And so, with that note, we are going to start off with the bad, which of course is bugs and glitches. Now, luckily, it seems like bugs and glitches aren't very prominent. Now, I will want you to keep in mind this is only with the base game, and unfortunately a lot of bugs and packs do occur with other content. So even though it's not super glitchy right now, which is great, that doesn't mean that it isn't going to be upon release. Now, the first bug might not be very pack specific. Apparently there are certain eyes that they are now enabled for all Sims, and if you use them on child Sims or younger, they might float above your head. Now, that said, the next bug is a little bit more concerning. As you know, one of the main features of this new game is about natural living, and with that also tending for plants. Now, the indoor plants unfortunately are running into several issues. Little Simsy especially said basically she wishes they hadn't added it at all, but in this case there are issues with plants disappearing in build buy mode, but the game thinks they are actually there. They also might glitch in your household inventory but leaves all of the pots still on the table, and sometimes they glitch into tables. There also occasionally is a visual glitch with fairy wings. Now, just so you know, you can have fairies without wings, but even if you do have wings on fairies, those wings might just disappear randomly. Now, it does seem like they come back and it's not a long-term glitch, but this is still worth noting and also very strange. Meanwhile, Lollipop Sims noticed some issues with the new Naturopath Career. With this, she said some of the interactions just would not complete or would just cancel out. She also did mention that it was highly repetitive, which we will get into later, but it does seem like she had some minor issues. Luckily, it seems like she was mostly able to complete it, but again, this could be a sign that the career is buggy. But next up, I do have some good news because this game actually has options, and this is going to be important because it brings with it new systems you might not want to mess with all the time. If you go into your game options when you have this expansion pack, as shown by English Simmer, there are options to limit fairies to the new world, which I think is absolutely excellent, and they should continue to do this. In addition, you can completely enable or disable the balance system, and also enable or disable the luck system. So if you get sick of the balance system or luck and you just don't want to play with it for any reason, you can just click it off. Hopefully this does work accordingly, but this was such a good move for this pack, and something again I think the team needs to continue to do both for player preference and also performance concerns. Now, that said, this is not going to be a comprehensive review. That is why I'm leaving the links to all the creators, but I do want to cover just a few key details on each feature. We're going to start off with the new career. You can actually send your Sims just like a rabbit hole career, or you can play it at home, and once you get to level 2, you can actually see clients. This is really great because it's an active career, but you can also use it as a rabbit hole. And honestly, all the creators I watched said that it was really not very difficult. Also, the career can be a little bit tedious. Miss Lollipop in particular felt it was very tedious with the same dialogue options over and over. There are clear physical indicators where you can see what ailments each Sim has, and then basically after you diagnose, you have to create a cure. This is made easier, of course, if you are a fairy. All in all, I don't think this is a bad addition, but from what I saw, it could get old pretty quickly. That said, I will say I think that's true of most active careers, and overall, I think this is just a nice side addition, but of course not a main feature. Of course, this all ties into ailments. Now, ailments, I will say, I think are an interesting feature, but it does sound like there might be some issues in terms of overall balance. Ailments actually are contagious. You can get them just from going to work. You can also get them if you're living off the land, and yes, you can get them from other Sims. What's great about this is it does kind of encourage an illness system that some people wanted, while some Simmers felt it was overdone. Several of the Simmers I watched said it was very common to see townies with ailments pretty much all the time, while some others said they were getting it as often as every other day. And such, there also doesn't appear to be immunity, meaning if you did get an ailment and another Sim got it, you could get it yet again. And so, while ailments are interesting, perhaps they do need some fine-tuning. But of course, that also goes into making elixirs with the new Apothecary table. You can improve this skill by using the new table and of course crafting and also researching or reading about it, which is pretty much normal. Honestly, there are mixed emotions about this too. While some simmers found it fairly simple and you just go and find the basic ingredients, Plumbella did say it took a while to progress. Of course, Plumbella was also doing some other content which we'll get into later in this video. Personally, it sounds like there is a little bit of challenge here, but it's not enormous, and so maybe that is a good balance. This doesn't seem to be a bad addition. It does feel similar to some other content I would argue we already have in Sims 4, but potentially this does overall seem to have a reasonable amount of challenge without being overbearing. And while I'm not going over every single potion you can make, nor do I know, there are of course potions to do harm and to do good. There's also an emotion stone where you can draw a crowd and actually bottle up and detect emotions, which is pretty interesting. There's also potions that can impact luck, so you can see how all these systems are kind of working together. And finally, an upper level potion is a holistic cure. Basically, this gets rid of all ailments and restores Sims' needs to full. Of course, again, you need ingredients, you have to forage for them, fairly simple. Some might be a little bit harder to find than others. And along with foraging, we do have a few new magical plants. There's the Aurora Blossom, which will impact moods. There's the Lightning Rod, which actually can electrocute you. And in addition, there's the Moody Shrub, which grows into very colorful plants. Again, I like the addition of magical plants. I do think we should have gotten more plants, but it's still a nice touch. I do want to talk though about the Nature Press next. Now what's really interesting about this pack, as I watch build buy overviews, apparently we don't really get anything much in terms of wall decor, in terms of artwork. Basically the substitution is this Nature Press. The good news is it is functional. You can make different portraits and even candles depending on what you collect. This is really great, and I think this is a great addition, and I believe even children can use this too. And while I do appreciate this, there are some downsides to it too. In short, you can use the Nature Press right away, and with being able to use the Nature Press right away, there's actually no skill involved. You pretty much can unlock anything at any given moment. The only nuance to the Nature Press is you have to have the proper ingredients. Honestly, I do understand why this was a disappointment for some, but I will take it, and the reason being, I still think it's a nice activity. Goodness knows that Sims need more activities. I like that different ages can use it, and also it's functional. So all in all, it does look like a nice addition, even if it's not terribly complex. Now, next up, there is a reason to explore the world. It is not terribly exciting, but it's still a decent addition. Now, Fables are offered through various NPCs, such as Spruce Almighty, of course, and some other ones you're going to meet in the world. Honestly, these just feel like mini side quests from what I can tell. Some simmers said it felt like cottage living Henford on Bagley side quests, and there is some lore in the world. Now, as far as lore in the world, it is Sims 4, so don't expect tons, but if you do want full overviews, I will leave links to creators below. All in all, again, like I feel like so many elements of this pack, it's not really exciting, but it's also a decent addition, and I do think it helps round out this pack, considering it is an expansion pack and it needs more features than a game pack. Now, honestly, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just wanted to show you the lot sizes in the new world, and these are all highlighted by English Simmer. I definitely recommend you check out her full overview of the world. We have about 14 lots, and yes, there are a variety of lot sizes. I'm not a builder, so I don't know exactly what people are looking for with this. Right here, we have a 30 by 30 lot, a 40 by 30 lot, a 20 by 20, a 50 by 50, and a 30 by 20. In the next district, we even get a 64 by 64, which is nice to see, and a 30 by 20, 40 by 30, 30 by 30, and 30 by 30. And for additional lots, I believe this is the coastal region. This world doesn't feel terribly unique to me, to be honest, but it does have some purpose and some utility, and there are some things to explore. And English Summer actually said she felt that it felt smaller and there were less empty spaces. Do keep in mind though, there definitely are still shelves, but there are some things to do in the world, so I wouldn't say it's a standout world, but it's also not terrible. Now, like all Sims worlds, there are of course pre-made families, including the Summer Dream family. Bad thing about the Summer Dream family, number one, there is no puck, and number two, there are many cases where Sims don't have any sentiments with other Sims. In addition, there's this whole storyline where one Sim is not in the household of their family, and sadly, they have no relationship whatsoever. So again, it's pretty bog standard for Sims 4. They did add in some fun little storylines, but some of them are not properly set up in terms of relationships. Now, one of the things to do in the world is visit this fairy hub. The fairy hub is a place where if you're a fairy, you can get a daily quota of fairy dust. Now, fairy dust can transport you to 2 hidden worlds in Sims 4, and it does have some other benefits too. In addition, here you can learn about fairies and you can just discuss things, and also there is the Fairy Council. Now, honestly, I don't know tons of information about the Fairy Council, but in short, if you cause too much trouble, which does include using magic in the coastal region, then you can get sanctioned. Unfortunately, this just means you'll basically get a trait and you will temporarily not be able to collect fairy dust from them. And as some Simmers have noted, they wish there was more consequence here. For example, if you really take out the Fairy Council, maybe all of your abilities could disappear. Still, nonetheless, it is scenic and I like the idea, and there is a little bit of lore to explore about the Fairy Council and why it was established, as well as the dynamic between gnomes and fairies in this new world. Now again, I'm not giving everything away here. There's also other elements you can stumble upon, such as a fairy circle. There's also a little shop where you can buy seeds and supplies. There's even a used bookstore. Again, most of these are either stalls or rabbit hole locations, but I will say that is better than just empty shelves. So I can see how they're trying to add some immersion, but still sticking with the Sims 4 formula. And as you can imagine, there are different places to swim, and of course all this connects with the new natural living skill. Now, natural living skill is interesting because I saw so many reviews, so many people actually really love this aspect, saying it's great for rags to riches and challenge, while English Simmer actually said she would never use it because it took away the challenge. So this is definitely open to interpretation. I will say, however, I feel like natural living is suitable for one Sim, maybe not for a family as much. Plumbella tested this all out with a family and there were some serious issues. She actually cooked food for her children and a lot of them just would not eat the food. I don't know if there was a glitch in her game, it was pretty concerning. She actually had, I believe, a toddler get taken away. It was pretty wild, but children actually can develop the natural living skill, so just something to keep in mind. On this path, you are instantly working on the natural living skill. This includes being able to sleep outside comfortably, being able to summon a bush to pee in at level 2, I believe, and also the ability to just gulp down raw fish. On one hand, I do think this poses some challenge and it takes a while. Your Sim will be very dirty and have low needs as they do this. And it's also important to consider what kind of challenges or storylines you can put with this. And of course, it also includes things like bathing in open water. And at one of the highest levels of the natural living skill, you can meditate too. It gives you mindful enjoyment. Now, please note, this is pretty much the same as Spa Day. It's the same animations, and it really just gives you a moodlet with happiness and confidence boost. However, let's hop back into cast really quickly here. We do, of course, get new traits and aspirations, and I have good news and bad news. Good news is we get several. Bad news is most Simmers were not super impressed. We get disruptive Sims, mystical Sims, and plant lovers. Now, disruptive Sims supposedly can build mischief faster and are slower to regain balance, but honestly, a lot of Simmers didn't notice much at all with this trait. As far as mystical Sims, you can grant sacred blessings to increase balance, and we will get into balance in just a moment, but you can also read a Sim's aura. You can give them a color and how it relates to them. And finally, there is the plant lover trait. Now, of all these traits, I heard the most complaints about plant lovers. This is because with plant lovers, you have a special bond with plants as the name indicates. Unfortunately, this means if you spend too much time away from plants, you get really upset. They also have this animation where they'll just whip out a huge plant at any given time. Overall, it seems like plant lover doesn't add honestly very much. Mystical Sims is kind of interesting with the whole reading your aura, and Disruptive Sims has a lot of interest to it, but so much hinges on how the balance system works. And because balance has some mixed reviews, therefore Disruptive Sims do as well. All in all, it seems seems like the traits are kind of bog standard for Sims 4. They're not terrible, but they're not also very great. But of course, we do need to get into aspirations too. Now, one of the main aspirations is fairy stories, which of course makes sense if you are a fairy. What this is it starts with a small portion and then you get to pick your individual branch. In other words, you get to decide if you're going to be a quote unquote good fairy or a more nefarious fairy. You have to become a fairy, you have to befriend some fairies, and also you have to have a fairy dance. Really, just some basic things. You'll also have to use fairy dust. And then from there, you will progress to the next stages. That can be the discordant fairy path or, of course, harmonious fairy path. With discordant, you are trying to mess with relationships, cause Sims to become ill, and you can also manipulate other Sims. With harmonious, it's more about nurturing plants and also helping other Sims out. That is just basically a brief synopsis. But we also, of course, have the elixir enthusiast, which does go along with the new career and crafting, and is pretty much just a tutorial for that career. And finally, there is the nature nomad, which of course is encouraging you to explore the new natural living skill. It's basically all about fishing, harvesting, foraging. You can do this in any world, that's good. And of course, this is good for rags to riches, but opinions differ. So in short, it's either about really following the new career, becoming a fairy, or living out on the land, which is pretty much the theme for the entire pack. Now, in my humble opinion, if there's one reason to get this pack, it would be for fairies. And honestly, this is a relief because there is nuance and some complexity to fairies. Now, I would recommend watching full reviews, I have linked them, to really just see how it all plays out. I wouldn't say that fairies really excite me greatly, but I think they do have enough complexity to allow for replay value and to be a decent occult. As we have discussed, of course fairies do have a skill tree, and like I said before, there are different ways you can go with these fairies. I will say, even if fairies can't go fully evil, at least there is some chaos you can create. Within the skill tree, there are 5 different levels, from faint to glowing to glimmering to brilliant to radiant. Fairies do have a slightly longer lifespan than other Sims, and their abilities fall into one of 4 groups. This includes manipulating Sims to find out information, manipulating objects, and also manipulating luck. You can also age Sims up, but unfortunately you cannot kill them with this, so they didn't go full way with that. In addition, fairies are also able to sway moods and emotions, and in fact, fairies rely on emotions for their life force. Fairies can bottle these emotions to keep for themselves, and in addition, they can project mood and influence relationships. With nature, they can nurture plants and animals, they can enchant plants, and you can also help them bloom or even duplicate harvestables. Fairies are pretty useful if you like gardening and if gardening actually works. Fairies can become overloaded if they absorb too strong of emotions, and yes, this does remind me of Realm of Magic, and some other people mention that too, but apparently it's pretty hard for this to happen. You get tons of warnings and it just takes a lot of work to actually die that way. You will see other fairies flying around the world. They can put a spell on you and play with your emotions, but most Simmers felt this wasn't balanced and it wasn't just happening all the time. Again, there is this emotional force instead of a bladder or hunger need, which I do think is pretty interesting, and feasting on emotions is a default power, so that means you can take emotions from other Sims regardless of your skill level. It should also be said that many Simmers felt it was really easy to progress as fairies, so even though they do have nuance and complexity, I wouldn't say it's difficult whatsoever. Also, it's not even difficult to become a fairy. Basically, to become a fairy, you have to plant a seedling and then you summon Mother Nature, and Mother Nature will give you a potion to drink, and you can wander out into the magical lake. I don't remember the exact name for it, but in short, becoming a fairy is just really easy. You can actually forage for the fairy seedling, or you can just pretty much order it. Fairies don't have tons of challenge, it's easy to become a fairy, and it's also easy to level up, but at least their powers have some nuance and do have some useful intentions. If you want to mess with Sims' lives by messing up their relationships, definitely can do that. And also, if you want to help your gardening out, they are also helpful there. All in all, I think fairies have enough complexity to merit them a decent occult, but they do fall short in a few other ways. However, I cannot help but admire some other things about fairies, especially the animations, and also their ability ability to shrink down. Now they can shrink down, then they can actually sleep in dollhouses, which I think is really cute. In addition, if they want to get their hygiene up or just their fun, they can actually go into sinks too. And this is a nice animation, and the fairies look just as good as they do full size. Of course, they also had the special air woohoo, which apparently you can do with regular Sims too, although I did not see that tested. And they can even go into fireplaces, but apparently that does not harm them whatsoever, so I don't know if that's an oversight. But the ability to shrink is fun, even if it's not super consequential, and when they turn tiny, they can also cleanse themselves in plants. This might not come as any surprise, but children and toddlers and infants, they don't really do much, even if they are fairies. There is a high fae lineage trait, and basically this is when both parents are fairies, and this allows them to achieve fairy experience more easily. Fairies can also die from emotional starvation, which is pretty much the same as regular starvation. Emotional starvation takes a very long time, it's pretty hard to do on accident, and you get lots of warnings, and again, the animation is going to be just the same as if you died from regular starvation. One other thing I did want to add is that babies and infants do have slower hunger and bladder decay, and you can also bottle feed them emotions. And now, as we've seen with so many Sims packs in the recent times, we get new systems of balance and imbalance and luck, and I understand why these new systems are being added. They add dimension to the pack and potentially replayability, and also make it feel more like it's actually expanding your game. As a reminder, as I already covered, you can turn these systems off if you want to, and it turns out you might want to. This is one of those things I think they are good ideas, and I don't think they're inherently terrible, but it's just really hard, no pun intended, as some Simmers said, to get the balance correct. I believe that was English Simmer. And in fact, English Simmer was not a huge fan of the balance and imbalance system. In fact, she went to call it useless, and this is because Sims were in a balanced mood almost all of the time. Imbalance can cause your Sims' needs to decay more quickly, and also cause some other problems in their life. Being in a negative mood can cause this imbalance, and she did admit it would be hard to strike that balance, like I said. But all in all, it sounds like the balance system maybe just doesn't do that much, and I think this is just a thing with Sims 4, where whenever we have systems that go one way or the other, it does tend to trend the more positive direction. But the main reason English Simmer argued it should not have been added is it just adds to more visual clutter, and we need a UI overhaul. And honestly, I can understand that. I do agree. I like the idea of some of these systems, but there's just so many in Sims right now, and I feel like it is becoming cluttered, and it's also getting more and more confusing. And honestly, if it happened all the time, that would be pretty bad. Again, I think it's interesting, but the problem is it is also predicated on Sims moods. So if anything, I'm almost relieved to hear this, because I was picturing imbalance happening all the time. However, the luck system is just a little bit different. Balance, more or less, is an average of your moods, while luck can change daily or even more than daily. Luck can impact what you forage, what you fish, and also your career. With luck, you can impact it many ways. There is the gnome, which we're not going to get too much into, the freezer bunny, so a little bit of lore, and also fairies. You can even change your own luck. So in a way, fairy is a cheat to get better luck. One Simmer said that luck only applies to this world, so unlike some other things in this pack, it does sound like luck is contained to this world. All in all, it was hard for me to tell, even watching tons of reviews, just how much balance or luck actually impacted your game, but at very least, it didn't sound like it was really intrusive. If anything, it sounds like the intrusive system is the ailments, and ailments you cannot turn off, apparently, so that's just something to keep in mind. Again, I would recommend watching full reviews. I'm just giving you a SparkNotes version of what I think most Simmers are talking about. Now, I'm just going to show some screenshots from James Turner's Build Buy overview. Overall, he and other Simmers felt Build Buy was decent. It's definitely more fantasy oriented, and there are some decent sets. We even get a full kitchen set. However, there is a visual inconsistency. The counters for the kitchen set do have some kind of problem on the edges, and it does look kind of strange, so I don't know if that was a mistake. And I would say the biggest critique I heard about Build Buy mode is that we simply didn't get new plants and new trees like we should have. Also, there is not much in the way of wall decor. That aside, there's a lot of Art Nouveau, there's a lot of wood tones, mossy details. It makes sense for the pack. I said before I wanted them to take it even further, and in fact, I think it was James that said the colors were quite muted, and he would have loved less muted options too. Again, Build By is not perfect, but you do get a lot of content. I'm not gonna even go into criticism because honestly, I've discussed it in the past. I have my own opinions on it. I am not a fan whatsoever, but I do think it has good customization for fairies, so that is definitely a plus. As far as overall thoughts, my perception so far is this is not a terribly bad pack and it's not a terribly good pack. It really depends if you're interested in either the natural living or fairies. I don't think it really brings super new or innovative content to the table. I think that some of the ideas are interesting. I will say, fairies look like they were handled with care, and I do think you will get some use out of them. As far as some other reviews, Little Simsy overall said that it was not as strong as Businesses and Hobbies and Life and Death, so if you like any of those packs, maybe you align with that. She did mention that natural living could be helpful for everyday gameplay, and the world has a variety in terms of style. English Simmer, meanwhile, said that the whole pack feels very young. English Simmer said there's just not enough challenge in this pack, but I do think this is a pretty common critique for a number of packs. Bella, who had posted a 2-hour playthrough, assuming we'll post a different review in the future, but for what it's worth, she did seem to be enjoying herself, so that is just something to keep in mind. Meanwhile, Lollipop was impressed with the fairy tree, the new gardening aspects, the natural living, but she did say the career was very repetitive and boring, and also there is still a lack of gameplay for children and below. But overall, she said she mostly enjoyed this pack. So I can't say for sure because I don't have my hands on it. I just wanted to give you an overview of what I've watched, and honestly, there's no way this was going to be comprehensive, but I do hope it's helpful for guiding you to content you might want to watch and just giving you an overall idea about this pack. Again, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not impressed with this pack, but I also don't think it's terrible either. I just feel very neutral about this pack even after watching all this content, which indeed is very strange. So let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. If you made it to the end of this, thank you so much because this was probably a long video. But as always, I appreciate you so much. Please take care and I'll see you in the next video.